Well, very good morning and welcome. My name is Keith Bottomley. I'm the Deputy Chairman of Policy, Deputy Political Leader here at the City of London Corporation. Thank you for joining us this morning. We have partnered at the City Corporation with KPMG to produce an in-depth report, which we're calling Financial and Professional Services, the Future of AI and the Workforce. And that is with the sole objective of looking at the impact on the sector of AI and jobs and of people and the workforce. So the piece provides context to better understand how AI is changing, has changed and will change skills, needs and jobs. So that is the focus. We did this by reviewing 7 categories. We've looked at insurance, asset management, investment banking, retail banking, challenger banks, fintech, and legal services, and representative roles across different functions such as revenue, controls, and support. Now, the study which Matt Verby will speak to in more detail in a moment showed that AI stands to be truly transformatory for the sector, a maximum of 12% productivity gain by 2025 and 50% gain by 2030. So that is an additional 35 billion by 2030 in the subsectors that we reviewed. So quite significant. But it also showed that there's great opportunity coming with this, but it's going to require some significant change. So since 2021, there's been an increase in generative and conversational AI skills by a factor of 150. Now, we think this report is an important piece of work that will help provide that additional context and clarity, and AI will impact. Of course, I think we all see this, the sector, and we think in a positive way, but that does require firms and individuals to start upskilling now. We hope the report serves as a useful benchmark for you for understanding how the different functions and different sectors within FPS will be impacted uniquely, and allow the workforce to anticipate and embrace the opportunity. We also think it's clear that in order to remain a globally competitive and innovative financial and professional services hub, we need our workforce to embrace this technological revolution. So today's panel brings together a true set of sector experts together to share thoughts on how best to embrace the upskilling challenge, both at institutional, but also at, importantly, the individual level. So thank you to KPMG for all their excellent work on this report. We've enjoyed working and partnering with them. And before I hand over to Matt at KPMG to walk us through the findings in detail, I'd like to remind all those watching online, please, to submit any questions using the submit button on your screens. I think we're all very familiar with Zoom now, but the submit button, there'll be time for Q&A at the end. If you want to direct your point to a specific panelist, then please just note that in the question. So with that, welcome all, and I will look forward to an insightful discussion, and now hand over to Matt to present the report findings. Matt.
Thank you so much, Keith, for that great introduction. My name's Matt. I head up Workforce Analytics for KPMG UK, and had the pleasure of working on this report in collaboration with City of London Corporation. We're going to jump through a couple of the key highlights from that report before really pivoting the conversation, as Keith mentioned, around how we as leaders in this space can really face into this opportunity with awareness of the challenges and really turn it into a positive driving force. So if we move into the content, we're going to zoom out for a second and just have a look at what is happening on a macro scale, and it is quite profound. We can see some very powerful exponential trends that are really taking hold at the moment and becoming particularly impactful. The technology price has fallen precipitously since 1970. The equivalent amount of computing power that in 1970 cost around 145 billion, or was enough to get rockets to the moon shortly prior to that, now costs less than 30 cents. So the power of that change and the extent to which technology has become cheaper really cannot be understated. And at the same time, technology, computational capacity has become hugely greater, more powerful. And something called exascale computing now exists, which is a computer that can make a billion calculations a second. And just around the corner, we have quantum computing, which is actually being pioneered and led out of Oxford and a lot of other UK hubs as well. So very relevant, particularly for the UK. Now, these two powerful trends, the computational capacity, the power of computers, and the price of technology, are moving in such an exponential way, whilst the cost of labour and human capability is, I'm afraid, fairly stagnant. So computers are getting much smarter and much cheaper. Humans, unfortunately, are not getting much smarter and much cheaper. So we're facing into this phenomenon now where organizations will have to adopt artificial intelligence, or they'll be priced out of the market. And so particularly, particular sectors where, such as knowledge work, where people's time is the key asset, are going to be profoundly affected. Now, if we move forward, we can see some of the findings from our research into this space really says that the impact is going to be different across revenue functions, where we still see a greater amount of face-to-face interaction with the customer, control functions and support functions. So we've tried to, especially for the financial services and professional services sector, look at the impact across those three areas as distinct types of work. And I'll just quickly share some important language that you may increasingly hear as well as we get to grips with AI and discuss it, is on the right hand side there around the phases of maturity that we may see, whereby we have co-pilots. We're talking a lot about co-pilots at the moment, a piece of AI augmented technology that that works alongside us to help us in our day-to-day work. But increasingly now we're hearing about agents. So agents, quite appropriately with their name, have more agency. They can act potentially with less interaction with the human, and more autonomously, and start to automate workflows. And then what we can see in the future is that agents and co-pilots and humans will work together in more complicated networks, as we have the opportunity to start to completely reimagine the way our companies work. So if we move on, we can see that the impact across the sector is projected to be quite profound. We've analysed a set of tasks, a very detailed set of tasks that are prevalent in different contexts across the financial and professional services sector, and we've analysed those alongside the capabilities of artificial intelligence and generative AI in particular. So yes, we're seeing, if all of those opportunities are taken, we're seeing in the region of a 50% opportunity for acceleration for value addition over the next 5 years. Now, those are particularly profound in our largest sectors across retail banking, legal services and insurance. And we are starting to see a really big uptick in the demand for those skills. So we can see 150 X increase in the demand for generative and conversational AI skills in job postings across the UK sector over the last year. Now, the productivity impact, the boost that we can expect across the sectors does differ by function. So we do see in the support functions such as operations, IT, HR, marketing, the nature of the work in those functions, it means that we do project the largest boost in productivity for those areas, and a lot of that will be focused in IT in particular, where software engineering, the development of code is a very powerful new capability that generative AI can meet. Control functions are next, and so we're seeing about a 50% increase across control functions. That's risk, legal, compliance, those functions which require a large amount of uh, contractual comparison, contractual generation, regulatory interpretation, and those types of activities are really real strength areas for artificial intelligence as it's growing at the moment. And then finally, slightly less, but still very important, are the revenue functions. So still more human interaction for a lot of financial and professional services required in those revenue generating, customer facing functions. And so a slightly lower impact projected in those revenue areas. If we move forwards, we can see a little bit more detail on some of those functions here. So we are seeing a huge increase in the demand of AI skills and the number of job posts that are focused on AI jobs over the last 12 months and 3 years, respectively. Now, some of these percentages are very large because they're from a low base. But if we pull out some of the highlights here, we can really see retail banking there on the bottom left, showing a 236% increase in the demand for AI skills over the last 3 years. And that really reflects the opportunity and the scale with which retail banking is realizing that they can achieve here. If we think about customer-facing apps, the ability to personalize, and the new channels that AI is opening up to do retail banking, the impact is very powerful. And then legal services there, again from quite a low base, but a 345% increase in the demand for AI skills, really reflecting the legal services sector's recognition that activities such as contract comparison, contract drafting, regulatory interpretation is going to profoundly boost what can be achieved with the same amount of human input in the legal services sector. We've put some use cases out on the right hand side there. Really, they're not super specific to the sector. You know, the ability to improve how we're doing customer service can be achieved across all the sectors. But some of those use cases really link to the sectors that you can see on the right there. But the ability to be better at fraud detection, better at customer engagement, personalized products, risk and controls is really some of the strength areas for AI as we're seeing them as we move into 2025. So just moving the conversation to skills, if we move on, you know, we do have a huge opportunity in the sector. We're well placed to take advantage of it, and facing into that from a skills perspective is really the key no regret bet that we can make to start to make sure that our workforce and our people are well positioned to seize this opportunity. Now, what we really wanted to share with you was a set of skills that we already have in abundance in the sector: critical thinking, strategic thinking, programming, ethical judgments, emotional intelligence, communication, and creativity. You know, these skills are absolutely the foundational skills for achieving this opportunity that we've uncovered together with generative AI and AI. However, there is a new skill set that really it didn't exist or wasn't really discussed before ChatGPT arrived or large language models arrived, and so there is a whole new skill set focused at making the most of this new capability, this new AI capability focused on generative AI, and that's prompt engineering, AI training, the knowledge and skill set around customizing AI, hybrid AI, bringing different types of AI together from the machine learning side to the generative AI side, leading in this space, designing great solutions, to designing responsible, ethical, and secure solutions, and designing or having awareness of workflows, stitching up different pieces of AI to achieve an end result in a complex workflow. So hopefully that pivots the conversation onto skills, which is going to be a lot of what we discuss next. But if we move to the closing slide here, we can see that for all of us, there are a set of no regret bets. The learning piece is certainly part of it, but for all of our organizations, let's not run into AI or adopting AI without thinking about our purpose. Why are we doing this? You know, what is that uniting vision that our organization and ultimately our society and economy wants to have around what do we want out of AI? Is it better customer service? Is it better performance? Is it more revenues? Let's have that purpose piece, and then let's implement it with the right protections in place, the right workforce plan in place, the right data infrastructure, and the right pace. And pace is important here because when we're talking about these exponential, very powerful forces, waiting a year means that you're more than 1 year behind at the end of that 12 months that you waited. So pace is very important. And then finally, just being aware of what's available from a regulatory government support perspective around incentives, training, reskilling, and IDSE support on this space as well, all hugely important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt, and that was a brilliant run through of the highlights of the report. Hello to everyone on the line. My name is Eric Jonan. I am the Regulation and Business Environment Advisor at the City of London Corporation, and I had the great pleasure of working with Matt to produce this report. I'd like to, as it were, welcome our panelists onto the stage. I would set the scene, but I think we've done that quite well with those last few slides. Really, it's the focus of today, and the discussion is about the how. And so, with that in mind, we'll pivot to a deeper dive in AI upskilling and what that means. So, if we could please have the panelists join us, and I will, as it were, go clockwise as I see you on my screens. Apologies if that's not what everyone else sees you, but we'll start with just very brief introductions with a wave, if you can, and then I'll go back to a question for you all to maybe reflect a minute or two on. So to the top left of my screen, I see Deborah O'Neill. Deborah is the head of Oliver Wyman's Digital Europe and a partner at Oliver Wyman. Good morning, Deborah. Thank you for joining.
Hi, Eric.
Next, I have Prag Sharma. He's the global head of Artificial Intelligence Center of Excellence at City Innovation Labs. Morning, Prag.
Morning. Morning, guys.
Then I see, following along, Pramod Apkatan. He's the Global Data Protection Officer at WorldPay. Morning, Pramod.
Morning, Eric. Hello, all.
And lastly, but certainly not least, Matt Yerbury, as he mentioned, head of Workforce Analytics and Digital at KPMG UK. Right, so I'll ask a question to start us off, and then we'll just sort of go back through in that order. So please just take a minute or two to reflect on the question. But I think to start us off right, let's start by defining AI skills. So what do you define AI skills to be, either specifically in the context of your job as is relevant, or indeed how you tend to discuss AI skills? And if you could give us a few examples of those skill sets or particular skills, that'd be really helpful. Deborah, I'll start with you, please.
Sure, and I think, Matt and the report covered quite a lot of what I would call the sort of higher level AI skills really well. So, the people who are constructing, designing, sort of producing sort of AI tooling or, modeling, or the things that are really producing that intelligence. A lot of what I spend a lot of time thinking about is the skills that the rest of the organizations require to sort of operate in this AI powered world. So whether that's people who are just trying to use the tools to help them do their jobs, or their jobs have been changed through AI. And I noticed Liz Williams is actually in the attendee panel, but Future.now have really been spending a lot of time looking at the essential digital skills for organizations, which actually are much broader than AI, but really are the foundations for how people actively digitally engage in their organizations and build on top of that. And I think for me, when I listen to the opportunity and sort of where we want to go with this, I'm constantly thinking, wow, we've got such a human change and cultural journey to go on for these organizations, because it's not just the people who are doing, really high advanced skills, but what we want is a place where people feel that their jobs will be enhanced and they'll be able to achieve more through AI, not go into the I'm hiding under the rock because my job's going to disappear, and actually I just won't engage it at all. And I think as organizations, we need to think about it both as a employer sort of proposition, but also our customers, because our customers are also employers of other organizations. And Future.now and the work we do with City of London, which is all around coalitions of organizations, I think this is a shared problem. It's not necessarily just a competitive problem. I can understand it gets competitive if you're a product producer or you're trying to do something niche, but actually from a day-to-day workforce and consumer behavior, I actually think it's a really important shared coalition problem, which I'm very excited that we're sort of bringing these panels together.
Excellent, thank you. Prog, same question.
Yeah, it's a interesting and actually a hard enough question to start the conversation on, to be honest. And I think Matthew covered a really good bit of what kind of skills are important in the world of AI, which is, talking about emotional intelligence, for example, numeracy, literacy, for example, and also common sense, which surprisingly isn't that common sometimes. So those are the skills that we kind of need in the world of AI. But more generally, everything, if you look at the space holistically, in the AI space, we're doing design, develop, test, build, deploy, manage, use, and govern AI. And that's the whole entire life cycle from, developing these tools all the way of using them and governing them. And in each of these verticals, we require skills to ensure we do each of those things well. So a lot of this often falls into the technology space, which is, if you want to be at the cutting edge of this, you need to be a good Python developer. You need to have strong technical skills. You need to have strong engineering skills. But that, to be fair, is only a component, a subcomponent of the overall skill set, very much like Deborah and Matthew have already mentioned. The other skills fall into the category of use. When you're trying to use this technology, you need to build up your skill sets to use that technology to the best of its ability. And some of those terms are starting to come forward, prompt engineering. I'm sure it'll pop up again, and we can talk about, is that a real job? Is that a real thing, or is that snake oil? We can jump into that a little bit. But the point is, there are many new skill sets that we all need to get familiar with. And the main point Deborah and Matthew have also made, your existing skills are even more valuable in the world of AI. It's not the other way around. Your existing know-how, when combined with how to use AI the best, is where you as an individual and you as an organization are going to shine. So build up those skills from your lens, from your risk lens, from your business lens, from your technology lens, as opposed to everybody rush off and start learning how to use Python.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Prague. Pramod, over to you. How do you define AI skills?
I think Matt, Prague, and Deborah has given a really good or holistic view of this. If I were to pick a couple of nuggets from there, so one is the concept of what I call as balance. And what I mean by balance is balance of risk, right? I think it's a skill which is evolving over time. And the reason I say that is, AI is great. It's giving huge amount of opportunities, but also bringing a lot of risks with it. Being able to identify those risks in multitude of areas, whether it's data, operational risk, cyber area, or even privacy to a large extent, requires careful consideration and understanding of how that risk manifests itself in real world, in our organizations, in our communities, to be honest, and being able to take pragmatic decisions that drive better outcome. And it's a skill which is a combination of things that exist, but having a stronger awareness of what's coming and allowing the business to run at pace. And I'd say the combination of balance and understanding of risk slightly more deeply would be a key skill to consider. And this is, of course, over and above whatever the other panelists have said.
Fantastic. Matt, I know you spoke a bit based on the slides, but I wondered if there's anything in having heard reflections from panelists that you would want to add.
Thanks, Eric. Very quickly, yes. So I think there's a relatively small segment of our organizations and workforce that will be tasked with designing, developing, and governing AI. And so that, and across that group, there might be probably a harder set of technical skills that are required to do that designing and engineering and governance. Now, there's a relatively larger segment of our workforce which will be tasked with executing and using, as Prague mentioned, AI, which is I think there's a more conceptual skill set around how it works, what skepticism to apply, how to balance the risk, which is more conceptual. But the final point on the skills piece is that we all have domain knowledge which has nothing to do with AI, and that skill set will become more and more important. Hopefully, my domain knowledge and my expertise area is workforce, and so having that conceptual knowledge of AI can help me be better at workforce, doing workforce applications, working in the workforce space. And I think that should be the mentality that we all take, is to have a base set of AI skills to help us go faster and focus on our domain knowledge and domain relevant skills that actually have nothing to do with AI as well.
Well, you haven't made it easy for me. There's an awful lot to take forward from there. Maybe just because it made me smirk a little bit, I'll circle back to Prog's comment on snake oil. Would you mind elaborating on whether you think prompt engineering is a skill that is useful, or, as you said, a bit of snake oil?
Sure. So maybe let's just jump into what prompt engineering is. Today's large language models require input from the end user in unstructured form, which is, a question in natural language. Actually, I was reading somewhere which was saying, the hottest new programming language is English, or whatever your native language is. So I like that, in the sense that that is the way you communicate with these large language models to start with. Okay. So what prompt engineering is talking about is, because of the way today's large language models are structured on a transformer-based approach, where they are focusing on predicting the next word in a sequence, you asking the large language models precisely what you want in clear English and being able to articulate that is a skill, okay, in and of itself. And that skill is called prompt engineering. I think the word engineering is thrown in to make it a little, I'm not sure, but the idea is that, you need to be articulate. So the reason I'm calling that a little bit of snake oil is, one, you should be articulate anyway when trying to talk to others. So the same rules apply when talking to other human beings. The more articulate you are, the better you're going to find yourself completing a lot of jobs with or without AI. But I agree that in the world of large language models, this skill has become more important, because asking the wrong question will send you down the wrong path in petabytes of data potentially. You come up with the wrong view and you're happy out with that view, because the language models are so assertive when they respond that you take it for granted. Look, this looks brilliant. I think they're right. So that's what prompt engineering is. Now, is it something we need to specialize in? I'm not so sure, because prompt engineering is not just about writing the best prompt. It is about the domain knowledge that Matthew and Deborah and Pramod have been talking about. That domain knowledge needs to be aligned with how to best talk, quote unquote, with these large language models. Then will give you the best results. So that's why I always think, if you were, say, because sometimes you hear you could become a prompt engineer. That's a career potentially, but it can't be the only piece that you do is, guide others on how best to write a prompt, because I think it's very much dependent on what you're trying to use these large language models for. And on top of that, these models are getting smarter and smarter. So maybe we could, like talking to other humans, or like me now, be less articulate sometimes, ramble a little bit sometimes, but even still get the message across. So maybe that's what will work out. So that's why I like this point around, is it really a skill? Yes, probably. Is it a job? I'm not so sure.
Well, I think that was very articulate.
Yeah, cheers.
Sure.
Will the large language model understand that, Eric? This is really the future, not yourself or me. We understand each other, but will machines understand us better is the whole point here.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Deborah, you mentioned sort of systems and wider conversations happening around skills. I wonder to what extent you see the primary barriers that firms are facing in terms of upskilling. Is it choosing which skills? Is it the structure in which they deploy it? What tends to be the sort of primary barriers that you see firms facing?
So I think there's a couple of things. I think there's a lack of understanding of what that appropriate skill set is that you should be developing across your workforce. We hear that a lot, particularly from the SME sector, that they're not actually sure what skills people are meant to be doing, or what they're going to need. And as we've all talked about, things are moving so fast, so I think it's a little bit uncertain for them. I know there's been lots of work sort of done to try and help with that, the essential digital skills framework that the government sort of originally set up and is being evolved for AI and things. So trying to point people at things that give them that sort of baseline to do. And then I think there is the measurement. How do you get people to assess themselves when a lot of people are scared to put their hands up and say, actually, I don't know how to do this? There's sort of the vulnerability change piece. And then there's people who actually just don't realize they don't have these skills, right? We've seen in many organizations very senior people who just don't realize they don't know how to do this until, it's sort of confronted with them. And then I think there is then there's a huge number of great providers out there who can help on these journeys, but again, helping people signpost them and really, help look for the right training to send people on. Not all of this training has to be expensive. There's been a huge amount of effort to set up, courses that help people going. I noticed that, the British Computer Society, BCS, have got some really nice sort of training courses on digital skills and things like that. So I think there is something about how we as a sort of industry ecosystem can really help sort of signpost people and make it straightforward. And then I think, what's been said, by Prague and others is this is a constantly evolving feast, right? So I think we all have a responsibility. I mean, even I need to go and continue to upskill myself in this space, right? It's not something that stands still. And so for organizations, they also need to think through how do you build that continuous learning into their organizational sort of DNA so that people are creating the opportunities and time and sharing. And I think what's interesting about, the conversation about prompt writing and things like that, I think the sooner that people can get their organization sharing good prompts and creating those libraries and really sharing that use cases, not every AI use case has to be game changing, right? It doesn't have to be, something that fundamentally shifts the organization, but we know that the productivity gains are going to come through those small incremental things. Take year-end appraisal writing. We'll all be going through that process. How do you use an AI tool not to write the review for you, but to take all of the information, consolidate it, give you the sort of highlights? Doesn't mean you're not going to read all of the documentation to make sure you fully understand the full picture, but it means you're not spending a lot of time copying and pasting. That's a individual productivity gain, but if you add that up over a whole organization, then actually potentially you're saving a lot of time from people to actually having the valuable conversations about people's development and where they're going in their careers, rather than everyone sitting doing a sort of cottage industry copy and pasting. So I think the more we can share these use cases, the prompts, the what you can use this for, people very quickly sort of latch onto that. And it's that whole mental change journey. We want this to people feel like actually that, rather than going, oh, I don't need this, I know how to do my job. It's actually, this is helping me do my job better, and therefore I'm walking towards it. And I think that's the culture that organizations need to get to, which has been a bit of a barrier because, if you read the press, it's all about getting rid of people's jobs or doing very dangerous things. So I think we have to find that new positivity, sort of cultural change ground.
I love it. Yep. That's fantastic. Pramod, I want to pivot to you. You mentioned a skill that I hadn't really considered, which was the balance of based on your sort of expertise in data privacy. Now the word escapes me, but I just want to dial in on that a little bit, because maybe it's a false sense of technical versus non-technical, and there's a clearer mixture to be had. I mean, from your point of view, working in data privacy, is it one is a technical and the other a horizontal or a non-technical skill, or is there a mixture to be had in both AI and data privacy of technical, non-technical skills?
Yeah, it's a great question, Eric. I think it's an evolving field. If you look at privacy for a second, the pace at which it has changed and evolved across the world, including the UK, is tremendous. And it is at the heart of AI development, because we are going to use some creative uses of data, using individuals' data in many cases, and that impacts personal data of individuals. Now, if people do not have understanding of what that risk entails, not just from a privacy perspective, so to some extent, the technicality of it, what it means in practice, then it will have an impact on the end outcome of what the AI is trying to achieve. Now, the way I look at this realistically from a skills perspective is I'm seeing a potential emergence of what I call as smart risk management or smart risk leadership. And what I mean by that is people who can bring thoughts with a carefully considered measure of addressing and mitigating the risks, but allow the business to progress through stages of the journey of AI, right? Without getting caught at the beginning of the journey with all the risks associated with, reducing the ability to progress at pace. because that's what I meant by balance. And if we are unable to achieve that, then AI will not progress. And it's unique in that the people who are engaging with AI in terms of risk needs to consider privacy. They need to understand some of the tenets of data management and data governance, how the data flows, understand the inputs, how the engine works, models to some extent, and how the models operate, and have a broader strategic thought of where the organization is heading, what are the big risks we are seeing. And to me, that's the word I used, which I think you were alluding to before, which is the balance of risk. And that means the skill is not about understanding the core of what the risks are, what the controls are, whether the controls will work effectively or not, whether we can monitor it effectively or not, whether we can measure the risks or not. That's just one part, which requires the technical ability. But it's also the pragmatism that comes with it, which is, okay, what are the worst case scenarios we should be prepared for, and give businesses the knowledge to proceed on that basis. If the businesses do not have the understanding of knowledge of shaping that, it will become very difficult to operate at pace. So to me, I think it's that concept of the technical knowledge of privacy and many other risks with the pragmatic knowledge of the business and the operational implications that needs to come together. And that's how I expect a faster movement of, or I would say not necessarily a faster movement, but a more balanced pace movement of AI going forward.
Thank you for that. It sounds like issues around governance and, if I might be so bold as projecting a little bit into the future, some of the skill sets that need to develop. And I think maybe with that, I'll pivot to Matt, because I think some of those things are touched on in the report in terms of the framework that's set out in the report. But in particular, and interestingly in that slide where you identified some potential new skills, what do you sort of predict in a very fast-paced environment and with a decreasing shelf life or half-life of these skill sets? What are the next few years of skills looking like? Where can people go and feel like investing in upskilling in this skill X will yield value for years to come?
It's a great question, Eric. And I think in terms of what's coming, I think that there is an increasing amount of thinking that says, large language models and generative AI, ChatGPT style technologies they're the new kid on the block. I think we recognize that there is there's truly transformational power in this new tech, but also that's going to settle into a broader set of skills and actually a broader set of technologies. So that high, from a solutions perspective, we already have a lot of AI in place in our systems. If we think about know your customer checks, fraud detection, automations within recruitment or client onboarding, and within our customer facing apps that our organizations probably all have. There's a lot of AI already, and we have a huge amount of infrastructure there. So the conversation around hybrid AI stitching, almost connecting different pieces of that technical infrastructure, both from a conceptual awareness and a design and engineering standpoint, will be really key. Now, the other piece is really that I think all organizations struggle with, and learners struggle with getting the time to learn. When you carving out that piece of your week to actually do formal learning. And I think there are questions and certainly a lot of growth around it. Okay, well, over the next few years, how can we adopt the skills we need to adopt in the flow of work, and thereby develop very relevant skills that are almost in real time, that are helping us do our work. And so I think across that space there is, I think that there's almost that curiosity and the commitment, almost a skill set of curiosity and that growth mindset to dedicate ourselves to learning, even if it's not segmented out, half a day or dedicated time to doing it in the flow of work. Yeah, getting good at prompt writing, just like everybody is good at Google searching. No one, I doubt anyone on this call did a course in doing a great Google search. However, doing a great Google search is a huge differentiator, today, using search engines. So I think just that base skill set and the growth mindset required over time to commit to using new skills, in the flow of work, in our day-to-day work, and thereby growing in a way that is very, very precise and finesse to what needs to happen.
Great, thanks. We're coming up close to the sort of time for Q&A. I've noticed a few trickling in, but I would just call everyone's attention to the Q&A button at the bottom. If you do have one, please, by all means, ask. I think we can start to pivot some of these. A few maybe we've touched on already, but I think let's pivot to one now. Having spoken very positively about the skills that we will need, how we can acquire them institutionally, what we need to do. There's a question here about how do we mitigate against the potential loss of skills by virtue of the use of AI? And if AI fails, how are we resilient to maintaining those skills? Does anyone in particular want to take this one on? Matt?
Happy to very quickly. So I think we touched on this earlier around our domain expertise, becoming almost more important and an area for focus once we're accelerated with AI. However, if there's a rite of passage in all of our sectors that means that new entrants into the workplace, gain their functional skills by moving up through junior and then intermediate and then hopefully senior roles, and there is a recognition that some of that kind of volume activity that is more focused in junior roles is going to be augmented and automated to a certain extent. So how do we ensure there is that throughput of people where AI takes up more of that volume work? And it's a hard one. However, for the traditional sense of the apprenticeship, pairing new entrants into the workplace with people with real mastery, those people with mastery are going to have to approve outputs from AI. They're going to ultimately be accountable for recommendations from AI systems. Really important that a human is still in the loop. And so pairing those masters, those people with the mastery, with new entrants into the workplace via a traditional apprenticeship scenario has a real role to play here. Apprenticeships and shadowing, I think, is a key answer there.
I guess one quick thought from me on that one. I think, it's also going to go back to the educational system, right? We still all learn our mental maths. We still, have to go through some of the sort of baseline learning exercise. I think similarly, the educational system will still need to talk to people about how does research work? How do you make, good problem statements? How do you build hypotheses? And I think, we know the educational system is going to have to evolve to sort of meet the needs of what we need. But I think some of those core skills around problem solving and sort of being critical analysis will still maintain. And I think we will need to continue to do that in the same way. We still all learn our times tables, even though we've all got calculators. I think there is a just rawness in the, basic sort of ability that we need people to be learning right from, when they're 3 or 4. It will evolve. They'll need different skills, but I think some of those core things will remain.
Thank you, Deborah. Building a little bit on this, Prague, I want to pivot to you. The city recently put out a report very similarly explaining sort of AI's impacts on the workforce, and it struck me that one thing that they said was that the greatest source of talent for financial services is other financial services. I wonder, given that conversation about the pipeline, sort of longer term trends of how skills will be acquired, how do you determine whether you upskill somebody in a skill or whether it's more efficient to bring that skill in either on a temporary basis or just to sort of hire in the skill?
Yeah, it's a good question, Eric. And, it really depends upon the organization otherwise. But the report that you mentioned that we released a little while ago, specifically focusing on jobs, was very good. In fact, I already quoted the hottest new programming language is English from that actual particular report. But there's a couple of other interesting points there um, that we point out. Trends, needs, and priorities are dynamic in nature, and so are the roles today are dynamic in nature. And if you look externally as well, many of the jobs that exist today did not exist in the 40s or 50s, for example. And similarly, there are going to be many new jobs in the future that even don't exist today. So this is more generally a dynamic space that we all need to keep up to speed with anyway. With regards to AI and Gen AI, I think we strongly believe that the key is to upskill your people within the organization as much as possible, specifically upskill those resources that are interested in this technology, that want to progress and get more used to it. There's a number of benefits for upskilling within the technology if you can find the right resources who are keen to do this themselves. This is that you maintain your institutional know-how, you maintain that skill set that's very unique to your organization that people have developed over time, and then they can apply AI to it specifically in their role. So I think that clearly is the most valuable way to go about in many parts of the business. The other bit is you may want to hire programmers who have skill sets that are coming out of college to do some of the programming in this space. They are going to be potentially better for some programming tasks or some AI related work because this is what they've studied. This is what they're good at. And then the other focus is senior or middle management need to upskill, or we need to hire the right skill sets from inside or outside to bridge that gap between juniors, middle, and senior management. So the decisions are made on a case by case basis, depending on your organization. What skill sets do you already have? If you're a strong data science hub already, then maybe you should continue to upskill them, but look for other resources. For example, large banks like ourselves have strong risk and governance programs and processes already from decades of work in the machine learning space and in the AI space previously. So we are looking to extend those. We're looking to look at the resources in those space and extend their skill sets to Gen AI. So a bit of mix of both, no straight answer, but your point is valid, which is you should look to analyze your workforce and find those people through internal training, surveys, or others to see which ones are interested in really taking this on as a technology from a development perspective, from a risk perspective, from a governance perspective, from a project management perspective, and many other perspectives, and then hire where there's a gap. Work with academia. That's my last point. Really good to work with academia. There's some good research going on where possible. Do that also.
Fantastic. Raman, and we just heard sort of a pipeline. We've talked a little bit about the various stages of career progression. I mean, taking it in a slightly different way of your smart risk management. And we've had a few questions about having the confidence to use AI, particularly if you sort of struggle to adopt to new technologies, but more broadly, feeling confident that you are able to play around with it to gain the skills in order to become confident within your workspace. What sort of advice or what sort of best practice have you seen to support people, encouraging people to try to upskill and play with these tools if they lack the confidence?
Yeah, very interesting one, Eric. I think it kind of comes down to creating high-performing teams, I guess, to some extent, and how do we work through that, right? I mean, the first thing we need to recognize is there is a huge amount of collaboration needed here, and many teams will work in different shapes and forms. I see something which is very slightly unusual than the past, which is that this is not just a human collaboration. This is also a machine collaboration. Therefore, there is a common goal, i.e. building an effective AI capability. So people will play with tools and structures in different shapes and forms. I think one of the things we need to do is to enable that through various means. And I'll come to that in a second. But the second aspect is, in order to build something and gain that confidence, what we need is a diverse set of people. And And not having that diversity of thought and action is likely to create a biased view of how a tool should work and operate. And I think that makes it worse if it has to perform well, and it needs to be good at what it needs to do as an AI capability. So I'd say three things big. Okay? There's no question this whole session is about skills, and I will re-emphasize it. It is about skills, and skills. Engineering, risk, infrastructure, Prague, Matt, Deborah all mentioned that. But one of the key things is early identification of that. Because if you start looking for something while you're building, you probably won't find it, because Prague's team will probably have most of those people. He's not to give them away, right? So it's not coming anyway. So having to think ahead is quite important. The second I would say is we have to reimagine this a little bit. AI systems are learning and adapting. And what we need is continuous learning and adaptation of the people. It means the people who are coming together and working should be able to adapt and change, add more, take some away. And that should be the ethos of the structure of the team itself. Third, I would say is train, but retrain. And what I mean by that is next generation of workforce is coming in. The training we need for certain generation of people would be slightly different, because they have the skills and expertise and experience in various shapes and forms to the others. And what we need is a cross training of those. And that will form the essence of a high performing team for you. And therefore means people can gain more confidence how they use the tools, how they test the tools, how they operate the tools, without the fear of any repercussions in the process, because it's still collaborative and adapting to change. So I'd say those are the core 3 points: skill, continuous evolution, and train and retrain.
Fantastic. Well, unsurprisingly, this session has flown by, and I'm sure we have a few more questions. I have loads more questions, but I think in order to wrap us up in time, I would maybe just do one quick round the group and ask for either a recommendation to an individual looking at the daunting task of what skill to choose, how to upskill, or indeed a policy recommendation for government in order to help firms to provide the upskilling that they need in what clearly is a huge demand. So with that, maybe we'll start as we did. Deborah, I'll come to you. Recommendation for an individual or a policy that you'd like to see?
I think it's both, but I think it's clarity on the skills you're trying to develop and go after those, rather than just doing a little bit of everything and not being clear on how that all adds up. So I think on a policy level, we need to be clear on what we think the minimum set of skills are for people today, for different job families, and help particularly SMEs really understand how to get there.
Brilliant. Prague?
My suggestion is for individuals, simply put, get stuck in, get your hands dirty with the technology, use it. Actually, much of it is free. Once you get stuck in, you're going to find the values, its limitations, its benefits, and you will be best placed to guide that policy, both nationally, but also within your organizations.
Fantastic, thanks. Pramod?
Sorry, coming off mute. I'd say don't let the worst case scenario dictate how things work. Free flow of thought and action is crucial, but we need the right intervention at the right times. And I would say work with people who can enable that in the organization, so that your skills will develop through the process. And as Prague said, get your hands dirty, but be aware of the risks that are coming and create the balance.
Fantastic, thank you. And last but certainly not least, Matt.
Thanks. I think just drawing on what everyone's shared, we need a set of guardrails within our organizations that support the learning, have awareness of the specific learning requirements of different job types, and then that we need the same guardrails at a UK level as well, to ensure that our learning sector and our adult learning provision provides that same set of guardrails. And I think with those two things and an appetite for learning on an individual level, then we can ensure that we're upskilling in the appropriate way and turning this into a success story.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all. I'm sure everyone online is same as I am, clapping, applauding for your really insightful contributions. I think this portion we will wrap up with again a major thank you for joining today and providing us your expertise. It's my pleasure now to hand over to my colleague Olivia for some closing reflections and remarks. Olivia?
Thanks so much, Eric, and a huge thanks to the panel that we had today. Really appreciate you spending your time. I just want to close with a few of the sort of key things that I've taken away from this really positive discussion. I mean, when we were thinking about this report and scoping out what we wanted to do, we were really thinking about what do we need to show to change the sort of dialogue away from this scary AI thing that is coming to take over all our jobs into how AI will enhance our jobs. And, you know, it's good for all of us as individuals, as companies, as the UK economy as a whole. And I think we did great things by highlighting with the deep data that Matt and his team did to show how it can boost productivity and sort of existing jobs and roles. And it was great to sort of for Matt to take us through the highlights of those report. I think they're still really relevant today. And I think we have seen a change in sort of overall dialogue away from the fear-mongering of AI and towards embracing of AI. We still have a ways to go for sure, but it sounds like we've got the right people around the table. To say a few things that stood out to me, I mean, I think it's really great to highlight, you know, the AI is about AI and people working together. It's not about, you know, a person or AI. It's about a person with AI. And how can we sort of play into that in a really positive way? How can we show AI as enhancing your role and your job and how you can achieve more with AI rather than, you know, that replacement? And I really think it's helpful to sort of highlight that, you know, it's not all about new skills and building brand new, super deep technical skills. It's about enhancing the existing skills you've got. So especially with highlighting, you know, those skills to do with being articulate and articulation versus prompt engineering, it's really a similar skill set to what we've already got. It's not something scary and brand new. It's honing the sort of the skills that we already have to make them applicable to these new technologies. You know, for people in the workforce today, we're constantly embracing new technologies, learning new systems, new programs. AI is just another one of those. It has maybe a scarier name, but really isn't any scarier than, you know, learning how to use Zoom versus Teams versus, you know, GChat. I think highlighting sort of what businesses need to do about being really clear about what the purpose is of doing all of this and doing it at the right pace with the right plans and thinking early, you know, get ahead of the curve, don't wait behind. So those were things that stood out to me. I know a lot of people took a lot else, but thank you again very much to the panel, to Eric for chairing, to Keith for opening, and look forward to following up with any and all of you on this report and how you're implementing AI within your own businesses. Thanks very much all. I'll bring that to a close. Take care.